Hello, boys and girls. I'm back, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite guitar amps, and that is the MESA BOOGIE Dual Rectifier. A guitar amp that I have been using for almost 20 years here at Kohle Studio, and I think it is one of the amps that I use the most for rhythm guitars. Not only because it sounds unique, but also because it works for a lot of genres, from hard rock to death metal. But the good news is that today I'm not alone. I found somebody who is even more passionate and even more nerdy and much more of a real rectifier expert than me. And I have 1,000 questions, and you sent me a lot of questions. Because, there's still a lot that I don't know for sure about the rectifier, about the different versions. You might have already guessed who I'm talking about. He has got a great and very popular YouTube channel called Riffs, Beards and Gear. And I just found out he plays in a great band as well, with a fantastic singer, fantastic songwriting. I just listened to the music today, and it was fucking awesome. Dragged Under. And, please welcome Mr. Ryan Fluff Bruce. How you doing?
Hello, sir. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I just came back from my summer holidays from Sweden, so batteries are charged and ready to roll. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's very, very hot here, and which is weird. It doesn't usually get this hot, but like today it's supposed to be almost 100, I think. So, which is why I was like, hey, can we do this in the morning before I'm just sitting here just sweating?
Which is much better for me too, because it's already 6 p.m. here.
Yeah.
Very often when I do interviews or videos with people in the, what's it called, Pacific time zone, right?
Yeah.
It gets very late, so I'm either tired or drunk. Tired or drunk, both not good for videos. Or both.
So we're gonna do another video where you get progressively more drunk as the video.
And you get more and more sweaty. You turn off the airco, I drink a lot of beer, and we see what happens.
You know what? That sounds like a good time to me.
Awesome. Yeah, last time we met, that was on your channel, and we talked about our favorite guitar rigs, and that's how I found out that you are a rectifier nerd, and that you know much more about rectifiers than me, and that you own way more rectifiers than me. And and now I invited you to come here on my channel. This is like perfect timing, because you just released uploaded a new website that, what is it? It explains the history of the dual channel.
Yeah, it's basically, I just called it the rectifier guide. So like I've been doing lots and lots of research and obsessive compulsive serial number, output trans numbers stuff, and I just kind of put all of the accurate information into one place. So if anyone wants to know what revision they have or how to identify or anything like that, it's up. There's a nice fancy timeline. I had some graphics made. It's just so I stopped getting messages on Facebook going, hey, what revision do I have? So this is just kind of the history. It's the history of the two-channel rectifier, and I'm a MESA artist, and I was able to kind of exploit that relationship with them, and I was able to call up Mike B, Gary Noble, and source all of this accurate information that I don't think a lot of people have ever done before.
Oh, wow. So that's the first link below to that website.
Yeah.
And why only the two-channel version? Will you be adding the other ones, or what's the reason?
We're talking about it. So Boogie was like, saw the website. I sent them the website. I was like, hey, check out this thing I did. They were like, hey, you want to do it for like the entire lineage? And I was like, maybe. The 3 channels, there are also revisions to the 3 channels. They do sound quite different from one to the other. For now, I'm going to just stick with the 2 channel, because the 2 channel for me there's like weird combination of like nostalgia, plus I actually absolutely I'm in love with how they sound. But for me, it also takes me back to some of my favorite moments in my youth, as it were, being a 90s kid. And so,
of course,
yeah, it's just a great time. And they're so versatile. The two channels are just so damn versatile. Like you said, you can just use them for literally anything.
Do you remember your first contact with the rectifier? Was that the ref, what do you say, G or F, or which? What was your first rectifier moment?
My first, so the first time I ever remember going, what is that? I started playing in the summer of 94. And at that time, there was a concert called Woodstock 94. And if you YouTube the Rollins Band, they do a song called Right Here Too Much. And Chris Haskett, his guitarist, was one of the very first guys to have the classic 90s Paul Reed Smith rectifier combination. And he had a couple of rack mount rectifiers. And that was the first time I was ever like, what is that sound? Like, I don't even know how to describe it because I just started playing. But it was this Mesa Boogie tread plate things. And I was like, I don't even know what those are, but these sound insane. But I actually didn't get a rectifier until the early 2000s because I couldn't ever afford them because they were expensive.
And what was your first rectifier?
I worked a bunch of overtime and I actually bought a 3-channel from a friend of mine who bought it brand new, and he was a Mesa artist and he was touring, and it's basically his backup amp. And I was like, hey man, can I give you $1,500 for it? And I had this 3-channel rectifier. I don't have it anymore, but I modded the hell out of it. I did like a bias mod myself, and I used to tinker with like changing out values of like pots and stuff. Like, it was cool. It was super cool.
That's interesting. So you started with the 3-channel, and then you revisited, or then you went back in history. So at some point you found out the 2-channel is the real deal, or the what you actually want, or
yeah, exactly. This is, not pre-internet, but like there wasn't a lot of information on these things back in the early 2000s. So like you didn't know, like, oh, all of those records that I love are using a different version of this amplifier. At the time when I was 20 years old, it was just like, oh, it's a rectifier. Okay, like it was whatever you could find. I don't ever recall ever seeing a 2-channel until I was in my mid-20s. You just oddly didn't see them anywhere, like for sale or anything like that. Like you never saw them ever.
But I remember because I got a Ref F, I think it is. It's serial number 700 and something. That's the one I bought, I don't know, used early 2000s or something for the studio. And that's the one I used. And then after that, they released the 3-channel version. And I remember that there was a huge discussion among studio owners, guitarists, and then the guy from Limp Bizkit said that he wanted to buy all the 2-channel rectifier that are still available, and people were alarmed.
Yep.
But there was a difference. I remember like having the first bands here in the studio with the 3-channel version, and it sounded brighter and
busier.
Yeah, I always went back to my 2-channel version, which I still have here today. So there was a difference, and I stopped following what Mesa Boogie did after that. I think now they understood at some point, and then they went back to a more old school Docker voicing or something. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the 3 channels, actually the very earliest 3 channels, like what, for example, Mark Tremonti toured with a lot, his triple rectifier, were not fizzy. They actually used a lot of the running gear from the 2 channels in that transition. They were amazing sounding. That would be like Rev C Plus, and then you get to like the mid 2000s, and then they changed it to like a Rev D. I think there's a Rev E as well for the 3 channels, and they get really fizzy and kind of farty, and then they have since gone back with the Badlander to the 2-channel layout. Although I don't know if I would call that a rectifier, like truly a rectifier, because like it is very hyper modern. Because the cool thing that makes the rectifiers cool is you can shape them to be whatever you need them to be, as opposed to, if an amp doesn't have a lot of low mids, it's pretty tough to put that back in. Whereas with the old 2 channels, it's easier to just take out whatever you don't need, and you're left with what you want. So,
how would you describe the sound of a rectifier? Like, I'm a metal guy, so I'm mainly talking about the modern high gain voicing.
Sure.
But how would you describe it? What makes it special?
It's crunchy. It is inherently kind of scooped. Like the classic Rev Gs are kind of scooped, which makes it sit in a mix really, really well. But honestly, they get tighter the harder you hit them with a boost or really hot, active pickups, or you can back it off and get bluesy tones with it. It's just they sound they just sound massive. They're just this really big ass
Low end.
fat butt amplifier. Yeah, dude. And it's just so sick.
It's the amp with the most low end, except for some Diesels that are maybe have a similar low end, but it's one of the fattest sounding amps. And one thing that I love about it is the dynamic distortion. If you compare it to whatever a 5150 or any typical other high gain amp, it is a lot less compressed for some reason. I don't know what they did, if it's the preamp or the power amp, but it's just, you can even see it in the waveform, you know. It's always more dynamic than your typical Engel Diesel 5150 whatever.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you know why? Is that the power amp or the preamp or?
I mean, the rectifiers have what's called a cathode base, like a cathode follower in the circuit, which basically acts as like a buffer between two circuits. But in this case, it's gonna preserve all of the dynamics going into the power section. Whereas, see if I can explain this so it's not too techy. A Mark series amplifier does not have a cathode follower, and so the rectifiers their EQ movements and all that stuff is all post gain, so it's going to be more apparent when it shapes when you do something. Also, the tone stack is really unique. So like, if you want more mid range, you're going to turn the low end down as opposed to just adding mid range. It's kind of like a Marshall in that way, which kind of goes back to the the Soldano thing and all that kind of stuff. But like, I don't know. I think it's because of the cathode follower design that they have in it, and the preamp section is made to run really, really clean because it's making all of its gain in the preamp.
I have to ask you this, of course, because I also ask like my audience to send in some questions, and I got 280 comments or something. It was so.
Oh, whoa!
And the question that came all the time was, did Mesa Boogie really rip off the Soldano preamp? Is that true or?
Yes. So the main difference between a Soldano SL100 and an early rectifier is the power sections. The power sections are wildly different. The preamp sections, though, if you look at the schematics on the preamp of an SLO and a preamp of an old 2-channel rectifier, it's the same damn thing. It's literally the same thing. And that is what it is. That is left to history now. I know Mike Soldano has told me he was really bummed when the rectifiers came out, and he saw what it was inside. That is what it is. They're pretty far from that now, but at that time, yeah.
On the other hand, they don't sound alike, they just sound so different. Like I said, the even the Soldanos and later the 5150, which I guess is based on a Soldano again, are more compressed, have a totally different dynamic behavior, if you ask me. So even if the preamp is the same, I mean, if they don't sound the same, it's it's a different amplifier.
I agree that the power sections are what make the rectifier special, in my opinion. They're very, very clean. They actually run really, really cold, but this gives them just kind of a nice, I don't know, it gives them a nice detail as opposed to running crazy, crazy hot and no headroom left, because you're not making the gain from the power section, so they need to be really, really cold.
I also think that the typical frequency range also comes from the power section. So what I've been doing in the studio, like one of my favorite combinations is going into an orange preamp, like Rockaverb preamp or something. And if I need more rattle, if I need more low end, then I just send the signal into the rectifier power amp, and which gives you that creamy kind of orange distortion, but just a more hi-fi sounding, wider range. Sometimes I use just a rectifier power amp. I found out for myself that a big part of the rectifier sound is the power amp. At least in the modern, what is it called? Modern high gain,
the red channel, yeah.
That voicing. The power amp in my 2-channel just sounds like it's wide open, just.
Right. Yeah. Have you ever played with tube sets or anything like that with your rectifier?
I actually have EL34s in my rectifier now.
Sacrilege. No, I'm just kidding.
I liked it a little more. It got a little warmer and a little less, I mean, they're not really fizzy, but that typical aggressive upper mid bite got a little more tamed.
Yeah.
And then I stayed with the EL34s. Yeah, that's what I did. I never used the rectifier tubes. I don't know if anybody does that for metal. It makes no sense.
No.
And I've never switched it to what is it?
Spongy, not bold, silicone diodes.
Yeah.
Have you ever played with the preamp tubes?
No.
The tube types and what positions?
Should I?
Oh, dude. I could send you. So I have outfitted all of mine with actual old stock, because what they came with, basically, what they would have come in from the factory. Dude, it's night and day difference.
Okay, interesting.
So sick.
One question was also, are there any recommended mods? Which ones and why?
The Rev Gs, the last two channels, they went to a parallel loop. You could easily do a serial loop mod, which is moving one wire over on the control pot. There's many videos about doing this. For the 3 channels, I would also recommend doing the same thing. I don't know if you could consider it a mod, but ordering and playing with the power tubes like you have, playing with different tube brands and makes, will really drastically change the sound of the amplifier. If you use, short bottle tongue sole 6L6s versus the MESA 6L6s, wildly different sounds. So those are some easy mods. A bias mod is cool, so you don't have to get something in the MESA range, and you can actually kind of play with the sound manually, but obviously you'd have to be, semi-knowledgeable in order to bias your amplifier.
What is your favorite rectifier then? Is there...
I'm looking over, I have 6 of them next to me. I would say Rev E or Rev F. I have a Rev F dual and a Rev F triple. I don't know which one I like more. I think I like the duals more than the triples. The E is this weird, they only made the E, the Revision E, for 100 amplifiers before they went to the F. The E is this weird, there's a lot of mid-range and top end and barkiness to it, which is, it sounds kind of like a tube screamer when you plug into it instantly. It's really cool. But the Rev F is, I'm not selling up the hype of it because they're overhyped in my opinion, but the Rev F is probably my favorite of the bunch just because it's kind of a middle ground between one extreme and the other.
That means I actually accidentally bought the right one 20 years ago or something.
You have a really early one as well. You have a very early Rev F.
700 something.
You have the old Mark III transformers, output and power and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Do you still play a rectifier in your live rig these days?
Man, I wish I did. Well, okay, that's a trick question. So I used to tour with a rectifier. We are playing larger and larger shows for bigger and bigger bands. We're in that stage of our career where we're opening for a lot of people. We're about to do a 6-week run with Beartooth and Wage War, and we're the opening band, so we have to get off stage as fast as possible. We run Helixes, which I love the Line 6 Helix. I'm a huge fan. The model that I use for my live tone is a rectifier, though.
Okay.
So I guess technically, yes.
Technically,
but
yes.
no.
Yeah. But you feel you do feel a little bad about it, right? So
I do. And they know, Line 6, I talk to Matt at Line 6 all the time. I'm like, dude, the second, if we ever get to the point where we get roadies and stuff, I'm going back to real amps.
Let them carry them, yeah, right. Talking about emulations, that was another question. We're talking about Line 6 now. What's your favorite rectifier emulation? Is that the Helix, or are there any plugins you can recommend?
The Helix actually is really good. So the thing with the Helix is you don't use the stock model cabs. You have to use your own impulses. Your DV77 impulses are fantastic.
Thank you.
All of your impulses actually are just awesome. I use them quite often in here, but as far as plugins go, the STL Tones Amp Farm rectifier is very good. I'm a big fan of my own signature. I have a signature plugin with ML Sound Labs that we modeled my Rev F. I thought that was really good. I don't know if Neural doesn't have a rectifier that I'm aware of.
I don't think so.
They have a Soldano, they have a 5150. They have yet to do a rectifier, but the STL Tones one is just really damn good.
Okay, I have a few more questions from my audience. So let's see if you can answer them. Let's go. What about Gibson? Any changes you noticed?
No, I think Gibson buying Mesa Boogie is a good thing. It's actually pumped. It's gotten everyone at Mesa Boogie hyped again, and it's, they're going to have Gibson resources to do what they want. And, I know all those guys, and Gibson is 100% letting Mesa Boogie do whatever they continue to want to do. So I think it's a great relationship, similar to Yamaha buying Line 6.
Okay. So good news. Don't be afraid. what was the intention when Mesa Boogie built the first rectifier? Soldano copy?
No, so actually, so they started development of the rectifier in 1989, and they actually were trying to capture the hair metal thing of the boosted 800. They were trying to get like a boosted 800 Marshall-y kind of a thing without a boost, without a pedal, which is why it has just loads of gain and stuff like that. And the earliest rectifiers, like I have a Rev D, it's like 334. It doesn't have a ton of low end. It kind of, my buddy describes it having the low end of a flat tire. And it has a lot of upper mid stuff going on. It's very kind of 80s sounding. And then the grunge thing happened, and then suddenly everyone was like, I don't like mid-range, and so they took it all out.
Yeah, because when the rectifier was released, hair metal was gone, right? They
were like, oh crap. That's actually one of the reasons why there's so many revisions.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, next question. Mini recto for metal, yes or no?
Yeah, mini recto's sick, honestly.
Okay, haven't used it.
The recto-verb is very, very nice.
Next one. I've got an old rectifier preamp, the recording preamp. I like it, but it doesn't sound like my dual rectifier, even when playing it through the power amp of a rectifier. Why is that?
The rectifier preamp was, I believe that was the 3-channel design in a rack mount form. Those always sounded weird to me. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the rectifier preamps.
I remember one version where they had like a cab emulation, which sounded really bad. Or was that the preamp?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Talking about the rec, there was one question about. So what about the rec mount versions?
Yeah, they started out as a Rev. They came out when the Rev S started. The majority of them are Rev Gs, but they made a couple of thousand Rev Fs. I think a lot of people think they sound different. And they do sound really, really good. They were consistently really, really nice. That's what Jeff Loomis used on the Nevermore records from,
Rammstein used them live, I remember.
Yep, they used a couple of those. Yeah, Richard Z is actually, he loves the Rev C and Ds. And someone pointed out that he loves to make them basically sound like angles.
Okay.
Which actually isn't far from the truth, honestly, because his tone is very English. Anyway.
What's the difference with the new Badlander? Is it really a more modern version of the much-loved Rev D?
No, they didn't go like, oh, let's make a modern Rev D. They did sample. John Marshall did sample a bunch of old rectifiers to kind of see what make them tick. But no, the Badlander is very, very much its own thing. I would call it more of a mark than a rectifier myself.
And it has EL34s, right?
It does. I put 6L6s in mine.
Next one. Why would anyone use the tube rectifiers? I think we've answered that, right? You just don't use them.
Yeah.
Just don't use them.
Well, yeah. They give you a little bit softer attack. I mean, Soundgarden Super Unknown, Chris Cornell used, that's a 2-channel dual rectifier, Rev F, and that's with using the tube rectification.
Aside from the obvious, what differentiates? Oh God, that's difficult for a German. What differentiates trem-o-verbs from regular Ref G circuits?
The trem-o-verb is going to obviously have tremolo and reverb. Otherwise, it's a Rev G. And the trem-o-verb is one of the few amps that Mesa put out that doesn't have any. Not one of the few, but it didn't have hardly any revisions at all. I think there's a few Rev Fs, like maybe like 3 or 4 that I've ever seen. Most of them were just regular old Rev G amplifiers.
Okay. And what about the single rectifier? What about that? Is that a real rectifier?
It is. It's the 50 watt. It didn't have all the bells and whistles of the dual and triple. They sound cool. And they were really a way to get into the rectifier series without spending thousands of dollars. I think at that time, a buddy got one for, in the early 2000s, they were $1,000 or $1,200 or something like that. So like, they were a little cheaper than the dual. For me, if you're going to spend that much, just get the dual.
Yeah.
And they don't even make those anymore anyway. So
what was the difference? They did not have the rectifier tubes or something, right? Or was there?
They didn't have the rectification. It was 50 watts instead of 100. I think it was a much more simple, because it was always the 2-channel layout, even into the 3-channel amps. Mm-hmm. So it was still always just a dual channel thing. The Series 1 was cool, but meh.
What would you recommend if someone wants to buy a rectifier? Would you tell them to buy something used to get a 2-channel old version if possible, or are the very new ones, the what is it called, Badlander, and the latest 3-channel,
the multi-watt,
multi-watt, are they good enough?
The multi-watt, actually, I did a shootout on my channel a couple years ago with a Rev F and a multi-watt, the indistinguishables on the gain channels.
Okay.
The multi-watt is actually really, really, really good, and it has a really nice clean channel. The Badlander is very, very, very modern sounding. If it just depends on what kind of music they play. If they want to get into an old amp, the used market is pretty nuts right now. But you know, any old 2-channel is gonna be really, really nice and big and fat sounding. So
there's no magic rectifier or something. Is there anything people should not get, like whatever early 3 channels or?
No, I mean the later 3 channels get pretty fizzy, but honestly, I would say don't spend a whole truckload of money on some early forum hyped rectifier thinking that's the one you have to get. Don't spend $4,000 on a super rare Rev C serial number 3 thinking, oh, that's going to be the magic sauce. Between all the revisions of the 2-channel, they're not that different, and the internet will have you think otherwise, but they aren't that different. As far as the gain channels, clean channels, they're wildly different, hilariously different. But
I've never used a clean channel, to be honest.
Right?
On my old 2-channel, I haven't used it. Also, one thing I noticed is that when I use the loop, and because you can use the loop as another volume control or as a boost or something, the sound changes on my 2-channel Ref F. Is that a thing, or is that just
pretty normal?
It's normal. Okay.
Yeah. I actually use all of my loops. Like I use the master. I just kind of account for it. You're gonna lose some top end, and it kind of gets a little. I like that, and I just kind of incorporate it and account for it.
But it's not what you expect from a loop.
No. It's different for sure. I keep a small patch cable in mine in the back.
When I like analyze modern metal guitar tones these days, especially compared to whatever new metal and the 90s and the heydays of the rectifier, people use a lot more mids these days. They want something that I call like vocal or expensive sounding mids. And where the 90s used to be a lot more scooped, you know. I'm not even talking about gent, where they have like almost a honky kind of mid-range. So the question is that rectifier tone outdated?
I think maybe in its stock unboosted form, it might be slightly outdated by now. But I don't think you can make it sound however you want. That's the great part about it. Like, you know, Misha from Periphery just told me, like, I miss my Rev F. He really regrets getting rid of his. Like, there are pedals now. The pedal situation and the pedal selection can make it sound pretty modern, I would say. And I know a lot of guys that are using, like yourself. I have some other studio friends that are using their old 2-channel rectifiers in very, very big production records still. It's still just a great sounding all-around amplifier. So, no, I don't think it's outdated per se. It's definitely not like... It's not the cool Axe FX amp right now.
That's
though,
right.
For sure.
That's right. Yeah. And talking about pedals, what are your favorite pedals? Tube Screamer, of course, and
the best pedal. This is the dirty secret. Mark Lewis is going to hate me for even saying this. The Peppers Pedals Dirty Tree is the greatest pedal for a rectifier. What it is, so basically, you take a Fortin 33. Fortin 33 is and the Dirty Tree is based on a TC Electronic preamp from the 80s. But the cool thing about the Dirty Tree is it will do what the 33 does, but you can switch it over to the actual TC circuit if you want. And it's $125. And it is the greatest boost pedal for a rectifier I have ever heard or used. I actually just bought a second one.
Okay.
I love it so damn much. So the Peppers Dirty Tree, and really like a VFE Ice Cream, which is a tube screamer with a low pass and high pass filters built in. They don't make those anymore. Those are kind of hard to find. And just any of the Maxon stuff is fantastic as well.
That's something that people really need to understand. You need to tame that low end of the rectifier for anything modern. So going into the preamp, you need to shape off some of the lows somehow, either by using an EQ or by using a tube screamer.
Yeah.
I guess you answered all the questions. I mean, there might be 150 other questions, but I also skipped the ones that were too nerdy for me. I didn't even understand some of the questions that were too techy for me, you know.
Fair enough.
So,
Fair enough.
So who cares? The most interesting part is, I mean, you are a real rectifier nerd, but you still say that any rectifier does the trick, more or less, right? There's no real shitty version.
Yeah, you can get there. You can get there no matter what. A lot of great records have been made with the 3 channels. You know, tell me Nickelback records sound bad. They don't. No.
They actually sound pretty damn good, yeah.
they sound really good. Those are mostly 3-channel rectifiers, you know? So, like, there's a lot of internet hype about, oh, the 2 channels, you know. The fact is they could actually remake part for part a revision F2 channel rectifier right now, and people would still complain that it's not like the old one.
That's right. On the other hand, I remember like I had 3-channel rectifiers here that really sounded a lot more fizzy and were a little more problematic in the studio. Still, you could get a great tone with them, you know. And just get any rectifier and concentrate on writing great riffs, and
boom.
Right, huh? So this was a useless conversation, more or less. Any rectifier will do it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next video should be like me getting drunk and you getting sweaty, right?
You know what? Will love I'm down. Let's do it.
You told me you're gonna play Germany next year, probably. Is that? I don't know if that's official yet, but if you're gonna play Germany, I'm gonna drink a lot of your backstage beer if I'm allowed to.
You know what? Yes.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Check out his band. I was seriously impressed. Dragged Under.
Thanks, man.
I just like good songwriting, you know, and you can hear if people can write catchy and good songs. So thanks a lot for this interview.
Thanks, man.
Guys, leave a comment below if you agree or don't agree, or if you want to tell me or him anything. There's a link below to Fluff's rectifier website, and I don't know, I will put anything below that he mentioned, the pedals and the software and all that stuff. All right, I see you in hell, motherfuckers. See you next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.